When the kidnappers asked Hayden to choose between us, he gave up his childhood sweetheart and chose me. But I didn't go with him. Because I know he will regret it. In my previous life, it was like this. After I was rescued, Hayden's childhood sweetheart had indecent photos taken by the kidnappers. She cut her wrists and died that night when she came back. Hayden pretended to be indifferent. As scheduled, he held a wedding with me. But after marriage, he made me suffer all kinds of grievances. 7 years later, I finally forced him to agree to a divorce. But on our way to get divorced, he lost control of the car and drove off a cliff. Even on his deathbed, he was still blaming me. We owe it to Chloe. We should atone for her in this life. What right do you have to live in peace? So starting over again, I don't want to live like that. Vera, come with me. When I realized I was reborn, the kidnapper was holding a knife against the necks of me and Chloe. They proposed that Hayden choose one of us to rescue. Hayden's gaze lingered on the two of us. After a fierce ideological struggle, he made the same choice as in his previous life. He reached out his hand to me. But I firmly shook my head. Hayden, save Chloe first. In this life, I don't want to owe anyone. I don't want to live with a life on my back. Hearing this, Hayden seemed to be relieved. Vera, you are my fiancée. I should save you first. But since you said so, then don't blame me. Then he took Chloe and left the scene as quickly as possible, for fear that I would change my mind in the next second. But I'm not like him. After making a choice, I regret it. In my previous life, it was like this. He rushed over with money. But the kidnapper raised the price temporarily and said that only one person could be taken away first. Hayden had no choice but to choose me in the end. However, during the time when we went back to gather money, the kidnapper became lustful after seeing Chloe. After taking indecent photos of her, they were about to insult her. Fortunately, we arrived with the police in time. But even if they didn't go through with the last step, at that time, for a girl, that kind of scene had already lost all dignity. Chloe returned home in a trance. After everyone fell asleep at night, she cut her wrists. By the time it was discovered, it was too late. After Hayden learned the news, he didn't show any sign of caring. He calmly handled Chloe's funeral affairs and took a large sum of money to comfort her family. Even when I took the initiative to postpone the wedding date, he refused it outright. Vera, marrying you is something planned long ago. It can't be affected by outsiders anyway. But it was the outsider in his mouth that he remembered for a full 7 years. Marrying me was just to trap me and make me atone for Chloe. But what's my fault? After Hayden and the others left, I was thinking of ways to save myself. Because this time, I'm not sure if Hayden will come back again. In my previous life, when he hugged Chloe under the pretext, he threw a locator into her pocket. So even if the kidnappers changed locations, we could find Chloe as soon as possible through the locator. But just now, it seemed as if he had forgotten about this. I guess that from the beginning to the end, the person he wanted to save was only Chloe. It was just because of my status as his fiancée and he was afraid of being criticized by others that he reluctantly chose me. After all, we are just in a family alliance. Our relationship is not so good anyway. And Chloe accompanied him through that most innocent time. They are childhood sweethearts and good friends and confidants. It's normal for Hayden in his previous life to regret. In this life, he can finally get what he wants. I'm happy for him. At the same time, I didn't forget to find an opportunity to escape. I know that when the kidnappers change locations, they will pass by an auto repair shop. The several auto mechanics inside are fierce and ruthless when fighting. In my previous life, when the kidnappers passed by here, they wanted to temporarily occupy the repair shop. But unexpectedly, the owner of the repair shop was a tough one and refused to agree no matter what. A group of people took up their tools and had a fierce fight. The kidnappers probably never dreamed that there are people more fierce than them. In the end, afraid of making things worse, they could only run away in dismay. Later, when the kidnappers were caught, the owner of the repair shop also came out to testify. Now, just like in the previous life, they left one person in the car to watch me. The rest all rushed towards the repair shop. With my hands tied behind my back, the kidnapper sitting in the driver's seat didn't take me seriously at all. So when he wasn't paying attention, I directly opened the car door handle with my mouth. Then I pushed open the car door and ran forward like crazy. My goal is the same as that of the kidnappers, which is also the auto repair shop. I want to take a gamble and bet that they won't stand by and do nothing. So I rushed in so blatantly. At this time, the repair shop was already in chaos. I saw the young repair shop owner at a glance. His facial features are three-dimensional and regular, exuding a sense of righteousness. Coupled with his neat skills, there is an indescribable coolness. Afraid of being accidentally injured, I crouched down and rushed over at lightning speed. As a result, I used too much force and directly knocked the person to the ground. When I fell into his arms, I was so scared that my face turned pale. Sorry. I apologized incoherently. Can you please save me? The man glanced at me and frowned. In the next second, he held me and rolled several times on the ground. Then there was a bang. A stool fell on the place where we had just been lying. If he hadn't found out in time, I'm afraid I would have been in great danger. Still in shock, the kidnappers here found that I had escaped. So from occupying the venue at the beginning, it has now become demanding people. The two sides are confronting each other. I looked at the man beside me longingly and said in a low voice, "As long as you can save me, I can do anything." But he didn't answer. Instead, he looked at those kidnappers thoughtfully. A person behind couldn't help but remind Wyatt, it's better to have less trouble than more. So his name is Wyatt. Having not received a reply for a long time, my heart gradually sank. Forget it. Why force others to do something difficult? When the kidnapper boss called me over for the third time, I took a step. But soon, my shoulder was pressed down. I was forced to stop. Wyatt stepped forward and said to those kidnappers, "I'm covering her today. Probably even God is helping me." Suddenly, the roar of motorcycles sounded outside the door. Wyatt had a confident smile on his face. "My helper is here." When the kidnappers heard this, they glared at me unwillingly, cursed and left. The suspended heart finally settled down. I secretly breathed a sigh of relief and then noticed that my wrist loosened. It was Wyatt who cut the rope on my hand. "My name is Vera. Thank you so much just now." I extended my hand to him. Wyatt kept staring at my wrist. There were blood marks on it from being tied by the rope, which looked shocking. "Let me deal with it for you." I shook my head. "This little injury is nothing." "Who said just now that as long as I can save you, you can do anything?" He pressed me on the stool without hesitation and then brought the medicine box. "Bear with it." I bit my lip and watched him seriously treating my wound. Suddenly, my heart warmed. I remember in my previous life, when I just got married to Hayden. Once when he was drunk, when I supported him back to the room, I just casually mentioned that he should drink less. As a result, he flew into a rage and pushed me hard. I lost my balance and fell to the ground. The jade bracelet on my wrist knocked on the floor and broke into pieces. The fragments scratched my wrist. I screamed and covered my bleeding wrist and cried out in pain. After Hayden saw it, he just stared at me coldly and said, "Does it hurt?" "It should hurt. Chloe was in 1,000 times more pain than you back then. But now she can't feel the pain anymore. If it wasn't to save you, how could she be insulted by the kidnappers? And how could she be so desperate?" I just sat on the ground, looking incredulous. My heart grew cold inch by inch. After a long time, I found my voice. "But the kidnappers kidnapped me and Chloe to threaten you. And it was you who chose to save me first. Now why are you saying these things to me?" The drunkenness on his face seemed to have subsided a lot, but his eyes were still cold. "Vera, I actually have always been against this marriage alliance. If you hadn't told Grandma that you liked me, Grandma wouldn't have forced me to marry you. So, do you mean that if it wasn't for me, you only need to save Chloe alone? Haha." I suddenly laughed. "Hayden, you are really sick. Instead of blaming the kidnappers, you blame me." I got up and went back to my room to deal with the wound by myself. From then on, no matter how painful it was, I never told Hayden again. Now, the person in front of me is afraid that I will hurt. He is clumsily blowing on my wound. My eyes are sore. I close my eyes and take a deep breath. I ask knowingly, "What are you doing?" Wyatt raised his head, his smile pure. "When I was injured as a child, my mother used this method. Do you see if it's better?" I nodded. "Well, it's much better." Getting recognition, Wyatt continued the action just now. But this atmosphere was soon destroyed. "Brother Wyatt, I heard that someone came to make trouble at your repair shop, so I rushed over immediately." "Oh my! Where did you find such a beautiful girl?" A tall man with a flowery arm tattoo came in at the door. When he saw me, his eyes immediately lit up. "It's really rare. It seems that it's the first time I've seen such a beautiful girl here in your place." As the man with the flowery arm spoke, a strange shyness climbed onto his face. Seeing this, Wyatt blocked me behind him. "Thanks, but the matter has been resolved. As for other things, it has nothing to do with you. I'll treat you to a drink another day." The man with the flowery arm was stunned and reacted. "Wyatt, now that you have a girl, you don't even want to deal with your brother?" He turned his head arrogantly and snorted heavily. It seemed that he was angry. Wyatt put his hand on his forehead. Then he pulled him aside and said in a low voice, "Can't you be a bit more perceptive? Go wherever it's cool." "Brother Wyatt, is she your girlfriend? Does it look like it?" At first glance, they are extremely well matched. Good for you for being perceptive. I don't care. You have to give me wedding candies. There won't be less for you." The two people not far away have been whispering. Although they have deliberately lowered their voices, those words still clearly reached my ears. To ease the embarrassment, I deliberately pretended to be very busy. Looking left, right, up and down, I just didn't dare to look at them. A few minutes later, the man with the flowery arm was fooled away by Wyatt. After he left, Wyatt asked me, "Where do you live? I'll take you home." Probably because of selfishness, I suddenly didn't want to go back so soon. Anyway, my parents are always busy with their own affairs. Even if I don't go home for a month, they won't ask. As for Hayden, if I guess correctly, he is probably reborn too. At this time, he should be eager to be with Chloe for the rest of his life. In my previous life, after being married to him for 7 years, he never took me to any occasion and didn't sleep in the same room as me. When others asked about me, he always had a cold face and finally turned me into a joke in the circle. In this life, I'll stay far away from him. So I pleaded with Wyatt, "Can you take me in for a few days?" My finger carefully grabbed the corner of his clothes and shook it. Judging from 2 lifetimes, he should be a good person. And he has the ability to protect me. If I cling to him, will he refuse? Wyatt suddenly lowered his head and leaned close to me, staring at me with extremely hot eyes. "Little girl, if you keep doing this, I will take it seriously." Perhaps the distance was too close. I could even smell the fresh soap fragrance on his body. Subconsciously swallowing, I was about to speak when I heard a familiar voice from behind. "What are you doing?" It was Hayden. "He brought the police and arrived. Are you okay?" Hayden looked at me. The concern in his eyes didn't seem fake. I spread out my hands. "Do I look like I'm in trouble?" Hayden was silent. Chloe then walked in too. She took a look at the repair shop that had resumed normal operation and asked directly, "Vera, how did you escape from the kidnappers?" "As far as I know, there are 6 of them in total. Your hands are tied and you are in an unfamiliar place. I'm really curious. What does Chloe mean by this?" As we all know, the Vera family and the Hayden family are planning an alliance. But at the same time, they are all eyeing the land in the south of the city. And the auction will be held in 10 days. The one with the highest price wins. But at this most critical moment, such a thing happened. The ransom is still frighteningly high. Vera, it's really hard for me not to think wrongly. Is she suspecting that the kidnappers were hired by me? I admit that I have never been so speechless in 2 lifetimes. I am really helpless and sympathetic about Chloe's experience in the previous life. But in this life, it is equivalent to me saving her. As a result, after she was rescued, the first thing she did was to bite me back. It's really chilling. I suddenly raised my hand and shouted loudly, "Uncle Policeman, someone here is slandering me." Then we were all taken away. While waiting for interrogation, Chloe still wouldn't let it go. "Vera, why don't you dare to say it?" I snorted coldly, "Why should I tell you? You are not a policeman." Chloe was speechless for a moment. Hayden couldn't stand it anymore and immediately stood up to speak for Chloe. "Vera, Chloe just wants to know the truth of the matter so that she knows what should be said and what should not be said during the interrogation later. So? Do you still want to lie in front of Uncle Policeman?" Hayden got so angry that he stood up and pointed at me and said, "Vera, you are simply unreasonable." Wyatt, who came out of the interrogation room, just saw this scene and without saying a word, stood in front of me. "Put your hand down." There was no fluctuation in his tone, but there was an irresistible sense of oppression. Hiding behind Wyatt, I couldn't see the expressions of the two people at the moment, but I vaguely smelled a smell of gunpowder. Only then did I hear Hayden ask, "Who are you to her?" Wyatt turned his face to look at me and the corners of his mouth rose slightly. He asked in reply, "What do you think?" I raised my head and looked at that extremely perfect side face that was very close. In a strange way, I used my thumb and index finger to make a heart. Hayden saw the scene and his face darkened several degrees. Just at this time, the policeman called him to make a statement. After a series of interrogations, things probably have some clues. The police have locked in suspects. Now they can only arrest the kidnappers before they can conduct the next step of investigation. But I know that this matter was done by Hayden's competitor. Coming out of the police station, Wyatt looked at me and said, "Okay." "What?" I was full of confusion. He explained, "The thing you asked me in the afternoon." "Okay." I finally understood that he was referring to my asking him to take me in. "There are only me and my mother in my family. She just went back to the old house. I usually live in the repair shop. You can do as you please." I was about to agree. Hayden on the side said, "Vera, your uncle and aunt already know about your kidnapping. Now they should have gotten off the plane and are on their way home. Are you sure you don't want to go back?" I couldn't help but feel a pang in my heart. Hayden, an outsider, knows more about my parents than I do. Since I have memory, they have always been very busy. Busy to the point of forgetting my birthday and busy to the point of forgetting to come to my parents' meeting. I even deliberately did poorly in exams and deliberately injured myself in order to see them. Because only in this way will they show up briefly and give me a little insignificant love. Later, I stopped expecting and began to learn to celebrate my birthday by myself and spend money to ask the aunt who sells flowers to go to my parents' meeting for me because she is very gentle and very good looking. I grew up alone like this until I met Hayden. On the school basketball court, he casually blocked the ball that was originally going to hit me. The teenager in the sun had an exceptionally handsome face. A few drops of sweat slid down from his forehead, shining with a crystal clear luster. The corners of his eyes were slightly raised, with a hint of imperceptible arrogance. He said, "Classmate, be careful." With a cold voice line, at just one glance, I was lost. At that time, I was very timid. I said "thank you" in a low voice and then ran away. After that, I began to pay attention to him intentionally or unintentionally. I also knew that he had a very good childhood sweetheart, but the relationship between the two seemed to only stop at the stage of childhood sweethearts. The secret love in youth is silent but quietly spreads in the bottom of my heart. Later, even an accidental encounter and an inadvertent glance could make my face flush and my heart beat faster. In fact, I know very well that I will probably not be able to make decisions about my future marriage. So, when I learned that the person for the alliance was actually Hayden, I was happy for a long time. My parents also think highly of Hayden and usually contact him more often. In my previous life, when I proposed to divorce Hayden, they directly refused. Hayden is outstanding and can tolerate your bad habits. Don't you cherish it well and have to make us worry? I know that since we got married, the interests of the Vera family and the Hayden family have been tied together. Divorce is not such an easy thing. In this way, I endured year after year. In the end, I suffered from depression and began to self-harm before forcing Hayden to agree to divorce me. Since I have a new life, I want to live well for myself once. That's why I don't want to go home. However, I suddenly remembered that there was still one thing that hadn't been resolved and I had to go home. Before leaving, I took out the phone in Wyatt's pocket, entered my number on it, and then dialed it. I didn't return the phone to him until I heard the ringing. Remember to save my number. I'll come to find you in 2 days. After saying that, I hailed a taxi for myself and left in a swagger. From beginning to end, I didn't give Hayden a single glance. When I got home, I found my parents sitting in the living room waiting for me. Before I could speak, they scolded me head on. Hayden has told us about today's matter. Can you stop being so willful in the future? That's a kidnapper. You might lose your life. You actually let Hayden save others first? When my mother said this, she heaved a heavy sigh. How can we trust you with the company like this? Not trusting me, so in the previous life they gave the company to Hayden. Then they themselves were carefree and began to pursue their dreams when they were young. My father, who had been sitting on the sofa, suddenly said, "Let's hold the wedding sooner." I don't agree. I said in an uncompromising tone. I came back to tell you that tomorrow I will go to the Hayden family and call off this marriage. Whether you agree or not, this time I will make my own decision. And don't try to threaten me with the company. You can give it to whoever you like. You don't have to give it to me. Anyway, I don't want it either. In this new life, I have mastered the development trend of the next 7 years. I won't be destitute anyway. After leaving these words, I went back to my room. They must be even more disappointed in me, right? It doesn't matter. The next day, I got up very early. But I saw my mother waiting for me with breakfast she had made herself. I heard from Aunt Fong that you got up looking for food last night. It's Mom's fault. I forgot to ask if you had dinner. I was stunned on the spot, unable to figure out why my mother suddenly became so gentle and considerate. She affectionately tucked the strands of hair on my cheek behind my ear, and then said in a self-blaming tone, "Your father and I reflected last night. Maybe we have been using the wrong methods all along. We hope that when you grow up, you can be independent. So we dare not give you too much love for fear of spoiling you. If you want to make your own decisions, that's fine. We don't necessarily have to force you to marry into the Hayden family." Do they agree to my calling off the engagement? Suddenly I feel very sad. When Vera was young, she also made noises and caused troubles, but all she got was scolding. Later, she began to learn to be obedient and sensible, thinking that in this way she could get their attention. But in the end, they would only despise her for being weak and incompetent. Now, I just said some harsh words using their methods, and they have changed their views? Until the car arrived at the Hayden family villa, I still found it unbelievable. In fact, the marriage alliance between the Hayden family and the Vera family was first proposed by Hayden's grandma. The reason is that at a banquet, I saved Hayden's grandma who fainted due to hypoglycemia. After waking up, the old lady was very grateful to me and insisted on recognizing me as her god-granddaughter. In this way, we got familiar. From time to time, I would still go to the old house of the Hayden family for a meal. Until one time, I met Hayden there. Only then did I know that the old lady was Hayden's grandma. The old lady is as shrewd as a fox. At a glance, she saw that I liked Hayden. This led to what happened later. Now, it really feels a bit sorry to tell the old lady in person that I want to cancel the engagement. After all, she has already given me the bracelet passed down from generation to generation in the Hayden family. Now it seems that it can only be returned. Hayden arrived earlier than me, and Chloe was still with him. The two of them were dressed quite formally. Just after I broke off the engagement, they could immediately get engaged again. The main idea is that everyone is happy. But when I put the bracelet on the table, Hayden grabbed my wrist and asked, "What do you mean?" By the way, last night I only said that I would meet him at the old house of the Hayden family. I didn't mention breaking off the engagement. Hayden's grandma looked at us and seemed to realize something. "Vera, but did Hayden do something wrong to you?" As she spoke, she gave Chloe a hard look. I respectfully said to Hayden's grandma, "Grandma Hayden, it's me who wants to break off the engagement with Hayden." The tone was very calm, as if describing today's weather. And when Hayden heard this, his pupils suddenly constricted. Obviously, he couldn't believe it. "Why?" "Because you left me to save others yesterday. I think that's the person you want to marry, right?" I looked at Chloe and found that she was also staring at me, looking exactly like a stubborn little white flower. "No." There was a flash of self-doubt in Hayden's eyes. "Didn't you ask me to save Chloe first?" "I was testing you. The result is obvious." Hayden was suddenly speechless. Hayden's grandma sighed and said, "I heard about what happened yesterday. You are a good child. It's Hayden who doesn't deserve you." "Grandma." Hayden suddenly interrupted Hayden's grandma. He tightly grasped my wrist, wishing he could crush the bones. "Vera, I will not agree. Don't even think about it. The injury from yesterday wasn't healed yet. Being squeezed like this by him, it was estimated that it would bleed again. I endured the pain and suddenly found it very funny. After Chloe died in the previous life, he remembered it for a full 7 years. After being reborn, he couldn't wait to save Chloe. I thought he was so deeply in love with her that he couldn't wait to marry her home immediately." I twitched the corners of my mouth and smiled. "If you do this, then I will find the media tomorrow and unilaterally announce the cancellation of the engagement. At that time, it will still be the face of your Hayden family that will be lost." After saying that, I pried Hayden's fingers off one by one and turned to leave. I didn't expect Hayden to chase after me. Coincidentally, Wyatt's motorcycle also arrived at the gate of the Hayden family. Because I didn't want to get entangled with Hayden too much, I simply said, "Sorry, my boyfriend is here to pick me up." Hayden frowned unpleasantly and sneered, "Vera, are you sure you want to find such a poor guy to be your boyfriend? Can he give you happiness? Otherwise, find someone like you who is hypocritical and fickle-minded." After saying that, I walked towards Wyatt, but in the next second, my wrist was grabbed again. Ouch! I let out a cry of pain. Hayden, the person who started all this, only then saw the injury on my wrist. He panicked and wanted to explain. I didn't know you were injured." I lowered my eyes, with a sarcastic smile, "As if you would care if you knew." When Wyatt saw this scene, he couldn't bear it anymore. He rushed up and punched Hayden to the ground with one punch. The movement was fast, accurate and ruthless. Hayden spat out a mouthful of blood. There was a fierce look in his eyes, but he didn't dare to act rashly anymore. Seeing this, Wyatt said in a warning tone, "Stay away from her." Then he put his helmet on my head, started the engine, and took me away. The motorcycle sped through the mountains, and the scene in front of me changed rapidly. I leaned on Wyatt's back and felt the excitement brought by speed. It seemed that in this way, I could temporarily forget the previous unpleasantness. "Girlfriend, where are you going?" Wyatt's voice came from the front. I couldn't help laughing. It seemed that he had heard what I said just now. So I naturally put my arms around his waist and said, "Since you called me girlfriend, can I go to your house and have a look? I happen to be hungry." "Of course, no problem. Coincidentally, my cooking is not bad." "Then I want 4 dishes." "Must be arranged." Wyatt's laughter echoed in the mountains. I don't know if it's influenced by him, but at this moment I only feel extremely carefree in my heart. Wyatt's home is bigger than I imagined. He hurriedly brought me a brand new pair of men's slippers. It may be a bit big, but this is the only new pair at home. I casually put them on and said with a smile, "It doesn't matter." Fortunately, I occasionally come back to tidy up. It should not be too messy. Obviously he is the host, but on the contrary, he is the one who is restrained. I sat down on the sofa and looked at him with my chin in my hand and said, "I can't cook. You have to work hard today." Wyatt didn't go to cook immediately. Instead, he brought a medicine box. The wound that was originally bandaged yesterday was squeezed by Hayden today. The oozing blood stuck to the gauze. Now it has dried up and stuck to the wound. Wyatt carefully poured iodophor on the gauze, trying to separate the wound from the gauze. For such a delicate task, he, a big man, did it very seriously. Half an hour later, it was finally rebandaged. He didn't forget to remind, "Don't get in the water these 2 days." I subconsciously said, "Then how can I take a bath?" "It doesn't matter if you don't take a bath for 2 days." After thinking for a while, he added, "I won't dislike it." "How dare you?" "I don't dare." "Humph. Then shall I go cook?" I nodded with a smile. Suddenly I found that every time I was with Wyatt, I always felt particularly relaxed. An hour later, he cooked 4 dishes. They are sweet and sour pork tenderloin, garlic shrimp, steamed fish, and cold cucumber. He handed me the bowls and chopsticks. "Try it." After tasting several dishes in a row, I gave him a thumbs up. With excellent color, aroma, and taste, it is unforgettable once you eat it. Just like him. It seems that there will be no worry about having nowhere to eat in the future. In the afternoon, I received a call from my father. The general meaning is to let me participate in the auction in 10 days. He said that if I can win the land in the south of the city, the company will be fully entrusted to me in the future. I know that land. In addition to our 2 families, several other enterprises are also eyeing it. In my previous life, because of the kidnapping incident, I was greatly frightened. Coupled with Chloe's death later, it was impossible for me not to be affected at all. In this way, I got seriously ill and missed that auction. But even if I didn't get sick, I wouldn't compete with Hayden. At that time, I was full of Hayden and felt that I had finally found someone I could entrust my life to. But at that time, the Hayden family was facing a debt crisis. It was still somewhat difficult for Hayden to win that land. In the end, I took a sum of money from the Vera family to help him. In the end, Hayden successfully won the auction. After getting the land, he built a theme park there and recruited many merchants. In just a few years, he successfully pushed the Hayden family to a new height. From this, it can be seen that that land is a project that is guaranteed to make a profit. Otherwise, so many people wouldn't be eyeing it. And this time, I am determined to get it. But I didn't expect that Chloe would come to beg me. Unlike the aggressive attitude a few days ago, this time, she put on a very low profile and begged me in a humble tone. "Can you not break off the engagement with Hayden? Between me and him, we have always been just friends. As long as you promise, I will never appear in front of you again." I looked at her silently. In addition to being speechless, I was still speechless. Yes, in my previous life, I also always thought that they were just good friends. But when Chloe died, Hayden's behavior was definitely not just as simple as mourning a good friend. I remember the day he agreed to divorce me. After I suffered from depression, it was the 10th time I self-harmed. When he came back, what he saw was me lying on the ground, covered in blood. He may be afraid that I will die in his house and finally agreed to divorce me. But on the way to get divorced, he suddenly asked me, "Do you know that today is Chloe's death anniversary?" I looked at him blankly and shook my head. I can't even take care of myself. How can I remember these? But my reaction completely angered Hayden. He furiously pounded the steering wheel and scolded me for being cold-blooded and heartless. "The life you have now is exchanged for by Chloe's life. But you have never been grateful. Even her death anniversary you have forgotten. You just want to leave. Do you think you can get rid of the condemnation of your conscience like this? Vera, you really disgust me." I was also very angry at that time, so I didn't hold back and retorted, "Yes, you know how to be grateful. You can't forget her. Then why don't you die with her?" As soon as the words fell, the car suddenly swayed and finally rushed straight down the cliff. Even on his deathbed, Hayden was still blaming me. "We owe it to Chloe. We should atone for her in this life. What right do you have to live in peace? But in this life, we don't owe each other anything." I want to see what kind of ending Hayden will end up with. I made a gesture to signal Chloe not to say any more. After all, it's really disgusting for me to always think of things from my previous life. Don't you understand the situation? Now both the Hayden family and the Vera family have tacitly agreed that this engagement is void. Did Hayden ask you to come? She shook her head. No, I don't want to see him lose. Vera, didn't you always like Hayden very much before? This time it's my fault. I shouldn't have suspected that the kidnappers were hired by you. I shouldn't have suddenly come back from abroad. Otherwise, Hayden wouldn't have made you sad in order to save me. I was a little dizzy by her words. Don't want to see him lose? Chloe explained, the Hayden family needs the land in the south of the city to turn around. Vera, if you insist on breaking off the engagement, then can you not compete with Hayden? I sneered, what are you thinking? Now, I finally understand. In my previous life, when we rushed to save Chloe, the police had already arrested the kidnappers and successfully recovered the 2 huge ransoms. Coupled with the money I took from the Vera family, Hayden successfully won that land. But now, because of my self-rescue, the kidnappers were alarmed and they don't know where they have escaped. The police still haven't got any useful clues so far, let alone recover the ransom. In this way, the Hayden family has already lost its advantage if it wants to get the land. Chloe still refused to give up. She gritted her teeth and suddenly knelt down to me. Vera, I beg you. You cannot love him, but can you not destroy him? I have seen moral kidnapping, but I have never seen such a shameless moral kidnapping. I bent down, leaned close to her, and said softly, when you heard that Hayden was going to have an alliance with me, you went abroad. But when you heard that we were engaged, you suddenly came back. You are right. All this is your fault. So, you should help him yourself. Although your Chloe family is not as rich as my Vera family, but at least you can help a little bit, right? Besides, the last time he took the money to save was also you. It has nothing to do with me. You come to beg me. Should I say you are stupid or I am stupid? Hearing this, Chloe's little face turned deathly pale. She opened her mouth but in the end didn't say anything else. It would be best if she could figure it out. If not, it would be her own suffering. During this period, I went home once and found that my parents had left again. It seems that they are still the same, only caring about their own pursuits and never changing. And what they need is just a qualified heir and they don't care who it is. Forget it. It seems as if I care a lot about them. After lying at home for 2 days, my hand is almost healed. I took a car from the garage and went straight to Wyatt's repair shop. Before I could see Wyatt, I ran into that big flower-armed man from before. He awkwardly shouted at me, "Hello, sister-in-law. Where's Wyatt?" I asked him. He scratched his head and replied, "Brother Wyatt is out. Do you need him for something?" As soon as he finished speaking, he slapped his own mouth and muttered to himself, "Can't I look for him if there's nothing? Look at my stupid mouth." Then he grinned at me again. "Sister-in-law, take a rest first. Brother Wyatt should be back soon." I nodded and sat down on the sofa. On the coffee table, there are several different sets of tea sets. I brewed a pot of tea by myself and tasted it carefully. Leo didn't leave. His face was full of curiosity. His eyes were constantly secretly looking at me. Seeing that I was making tea by myself, he explained, "I am a rough person. I don't know how to do this stuff. Usually, Brother Wyatt brews it for me." "Don't mind." I raised my head and asked, "What's your name?" "Leo." "Is he very good to you?" For some reason, I just have this feeling. I saw Leo shake his head. I thought I had guessed wrong. Then he said, "No, Brother Wyatt is very good to all of us." I raised my eyebrows. "Oh? Tell me about it." Most of the employees in this repair shop come from poor mountainous areas. They all have more or less physical deficiencies. For example, Akun who is in charge of repairing engines. He can't speak. But as long as he hears a sound, he can tell where the broken part is. And Chinping who is in charge of maintenance is lame. Hayden who is in charge of painting doesn't know a single word. When they first came to this city, they wanted to find a way to make a living. But after they came, they found that with physical defects, no diplomas and no special skills, it was even difficult to find a decent job. It was Brother Wyatt who took them in. He gave them time to learn skills. He provided food and accommodation and also paid them salaries. So a group of people followed Brother Wyatt wholeheartedly and didn't go anywhere else. So that's it. I looked at Leo again and asked, "What about you?" Hearing this, a solemn expression appeared on his face for the first time. I met Brother Wyatt 5 years ago. At that time, I offended someone and was almost beaten to death. It was Brother Wyatt who saved me. From then on, I swore to follow Brother Wyatt all my life. Whoever dares to bully him must step over my dead body first. To be honest, after hearing these words, I was shocked inside. All along, the environment I am in is lonely, not to mention how many people can truly treat me well. But Wyatt can gather such a group of people and follow him steadfastly. I really envy him. Suddenly I really want to see him quickly. Do you know where he went? Leo thought for a while and said, Brother Wyatt didn't say the specific location. He only said that someone was looking for him. It seems to be at Tiancheng Plaza. I was about to leave. Leo seemed to remember something and said again, by the way, sister-in-law. In fact, Brother Wyatt is quite rich. He is just very low-key. Originally, he didn't let us call you sister-in-law. He said that you are a girl from a rich family and we should call you young lady. I frowned when I heard this. Why does Wyatt still use such an old-fashioned address? But I never dreamed that I would see Wyatt and Chloe sitting together in a coffee shop at Tiancheng Plaza. I don't know what Chloe was saying to Wyatt. I only saw that her eyes were red as if she had been crying. And Wyatt had been listening. The frown on his face never went away. After watching for a while, I found that Chloe suddenly stood up and directly sat next to Wyatt from the opposite position. My intuition told me that there was something not simple between them. If it were me before today, I might just leave like this and then block Wyatt. Because after being hurt once, I definitely can't tolerate any impure relationship anymore. But if it's Wyatt, I want to trust him once. Just when I was about to walk into the coffee shop, I saw that Wyatt, as if afraid of getting involved with something dirty, quickly got up and left his seat. And then I just walked into the store and our eyes met. Compared to my calmness, Wyatt was stunned for a moment. Obviously, he didn't expect me to appear here. Then he strode towards me. Vera. Chloe also chased out at this time. There was a hint of urgency on her face. Mr. Wyatt, as long as you can promise, Chloe's next words stopped abruptly after seeing me. But soon, she calmed down and instead asked me, Vera, why are you here? Could it be that you are also here to find Mr. Wyatt? As she spoke, she consciously leaned towards Wyatt, but Wyatt was very alert. When she leaned over, he immediately jumped in front of me. Looking at me with a slightly innocent look, he said, Vera, I pretended to be fierce. I'll deal with you when we get back. Chloe looked at our interaction mode and her eyes gradually dimmed. Vera, I really underestimated you. I shrugged and replied, yes, I think so too. Chloe was at a loss for words. Her face was like an overturned palette, turning green for a while, white for a while, and red for a while. It was extremely beautiful. In fact, I am not the kind of person who is easily bullied. In my previous life, if I hadn't taken people who didn't care about me so seriously, I wouldn't have lived such a terrible life. Wyatt took me back home. At this moment, it was almost completely dark. We just huddled on the sofa like this and neither of us spoke. After a long time, he broke the silence first. Aren't you going to ask? Didn't you say you were going to deal with me when you get back? I said in a gloomy tone, if you want to tell me, you will tell me even if I don't ask. If you don't want to tell me, it's useless to ask. There was no expression on Wyatt's face. Do you know why Chloe came to find me? I shook my head. On the way back, I thought of many reasons. For example, did Chloe take a fancy to Wyatt? Another example, Hayden couldn't stand us being together and deliberately asked Chloe to annoy me. After all, they have a good relationship and are willing to do anything for each other. But Wyatt suddenly asked me if I was eyeing that piece of land in the south of the city. I was shocked. How do you know? Because now the right to use that land is in my hands. That's something my father left me. How could it be such a coincidence? Wait, so Chloe is still not giving up and directly came to find Wyatt and wants to start with him? But how could she know that the land belongs to Wyatt? There is only one answer, that is, Hayden told her. In his previous life when he got the land, he must have contacted Wyatt and so he knew. Seeing Wyatt staring at me all the time, I immediately realized something. Don't you think that I approached you also for this land? Somehow, a bad feeling welled up in my heart. It turned out that when I had concerns about him, he was also suspecting me. I lowered my head, wanting to laugh but couldn't no matter what. Seeing this, Wyatt suddenly cupped my face and said seriously, "Fool, of course I don't think so." At first, this thought did flash through my mind, but soon I denied it. "I trust my own judgment," I asked, "just like when you saved Leo and them?" Wyatt raised an eyebrow. "No, you are different from them. Saving them is because of kindness. Saving you is because of being moved. Wyatt, you are really good at this." I pouted and complained a little dissatisfactionally. "So good at this, I don't know how many people he has dated." Wyatt looked at me dotingly. The hand holding my face moved slightly, forcing me to raise my head. Then a kiss fell, like a dragonfly skimming the water, just a brief touch. It's not being good at it. It's from the heart, natural, following instinct. I only felt my cheeks burning and my heart beating uncontrollably. Afraid that I would be found in this state, I had to bury my face in his arms. The position where my ear was against was his chest. The sound of his heartbeat was like thunder, deafening. One beat after another, as if loudly expressing his love for me. I closed my eyes and felt it. After a long time, I said, "Wyatt, I like you as much as you like me." He didn't answer but showed his attitude with actions. He held me tighter, so tight that it seemed as if he wanted to blend me into his bones and blood. When I got up the next day, Wyatt handed me a document. Taking a look, I found that it was a transfer agreement for land use rights. The name filled on it was actually mine. "Wyatt, are you crazy? Do you know what this means?" I couldn't believe it. How could someone be so stupid? "I have withdrawn from the auction. What you want, I just happen to have. There is no reason not to give it to you. It would be false to say I'm not touched." The whole heart seemed to be filled to the brim by something, hot and swollen. I blinked and forced back the tears. This is a good thing. I can't cry. Since he showed such great sincerity, I can't be outdone. I pulled him up and said as I walked, before signing, "You come with me to a place first." The place I took him to was the Civil Affairs Bureau. Wyatt repeatedly confirmed with me, "Are you really sure?" I looked at him and smiled. "Aren't you afraid that I'll take your things, then kick you away and find someone even more handsome and richer?" Wyatt frowned and thought for a while. "Well, I can't say about someone richer, but for someone more handsome, it should be very difficult to find." Yes, yes, yes. "So that's why I brought you here?" I didn't expect Hayden to find me so quickly. As soon as Wyatt and I came out of the Civil Affairs Bureau, the red book in our hands hadn't had time to be put away. Seeing this scene, Hayden's face was extremely ugly. Even his clenched fists were trembling. He said, "Vera, you finally followed him." "Nonsense." I rolled my eyes and didn't plan to pay attention to him. But Hayden grabbed me. Suddenly, 2 lines of tears flowed down his eyes. This is probably crocodile tears, right? But I really had something to say to Hayden, so I asked Wyatt to get in the car and wait for me first. When only the two of us were left, Hayden couldn't wait to say, "Vera, I regret it. I really regret it. You can hit me or scold me. I just beg you to forgive me." I sneered and asked in reply, "Regret? Regret what?" "Regret not saving me or regret not treating me well in the previous life." Hearing this, Hayden released my wrist. The blood on his face faded completely in an instant. It seems that even he himself doesn't want to recall the things in the previous life. After all, those pasts clearly exposed his various crimes. At this time, Hayden started slapping himself. While slapping, he said, "It was my being possessed. I was wrong. I deserve to die. But Vera, is there still a possibility between us?" I was silent for a moment, then asked lightly, "Hayden, what do you think?" He stopped, lowered his eyes, and his face was dejected. Suddenly thinking of something, there was a little more light in his eyes. "No, it's Chloe. It's all her fault. If she hadn't suddenly come back, there wouldn't be so many things. And I never asked her to come to you. It's all her own decision and wishful thinking." He grabbed my hand again and begged humbly, "Can you trust me one last time? The person I love has always been you." "Really? I know I'm guilty, so I won't ask you for anything. I just beg you to look at me. Even if it means making me a third party." I looked at Hayden in horror, unable to believe that these words came out of his mouth. I forcefully pulled back my hand and didn't forget to wipe it on my clothes. "Hayden, what are you after? Of course I wouldn't believe that he really loves me. Once having seen true love, I would only think this is unwanted rubbish." Hayden had an extremely affectionate look. "It's that I understood too late. Anyway, I will not give up on you." I only felt a chill down my spine. It felt no different from being haunted by a ghost. "Hayden, if you keep doing this, I will call the police." Hearing this, Hayden froze on the spot. Tears were flowing like they were free. I only felt irritable and couldn't wait to leave quickly. "Hayden, you have always only loved yourself. Whether it's Chloe or me, none is as important as your interests. But you are not reconciled. Why can I live a better life after leaving you? So you want to pull me into the abyss again. But Hayden, I am no longer alone now. My current husband is fierce and ruthless in a fight. He also has a group of people who are willing to risk their lives for him. If you think your life is too long, you can try." After I finished speaking, I glanced at Chloe not far away. In fact, I found out that she had followed us a long time ago, but I didn't say anything. I hope she can see Hayden's true nature clearly and not be sold and still count the money for the other party. It was like a farce that ended like this. After my father knew that I had successfully won that piece of land, he also handed over the company to me to manage as promised. I didn't tell them about me getting the marriage certificate with Wyatt because I didn't want anyone to disturb us. I just wanted to live a peaceful life for two people. Going back and forth between the company and home every day, time slipped away quietly. Soon after, I heard that Chloe was going abroad. The person who loves Hayden the most in this world doesn't want him anymore. Before she left, she published a long article on the social platform, which was full of condemnation of Hayden's betrayal and how cold-blooded and heartless he was. When I had nothing to do, I gave some traffic to that article. As a result, the Hayden family, which was already in a debt crisis, was affected by this incident. The stock price kept falling. It is said that it is about to face bankruptcy. Hayden was extremely busy every day, looking for people to help everywhere. But at this time, who would be willing to help him? So, he came to me again. It had been several months since we last met. I am now busy developing that piece of land every day. Thinking about making a lot of money in the future, I am full of energy. But today's Hayden is completely different from what I saw a few months ago. His face is extremely thin. There are dark circles under his eyes. He is unshaven and full of decadence. I asked him, "Do you want me to help you?" Unexpectedly, he shook his head. He told me, "Vera, I have suffered from depression. I haven't slept well for several months. I finally feel the pain you had before. This is all my retribution." I forced down the rising corner of my mouth and said, "How can this be retribution? This is your blessing. Think about it. In your previous life, you regretted not saving Chloe until you died. Even if you were successful and had me by your side, you were still not happy. Now it's good. God has given you a second chance. Although you have nothing now, you have made up for the regret of the previous life. That's enough. God is not unkind to you. People should not be too greedy. When you get something, you will lose something. You can't have it all." That was the last time I saw Hayden. Because 3 months later, on the night when the Hayden family announced its complete bankruptcy, Hayden got drunk and had a depression attack and fell into the bathtub. When he was found, he was already cold. Sure enough, karma is a cycle and retribution is inevitable. When Wyatt learned about this, he was giving me a back massage. My father once told me that if a person's character is not good, he is destined not to go far. I turned over and couldn't help asking, "Then how far do you think we can go?" Wyatt thought seriously for a while and said, "With our characters, going for 100 years is not excessive, right?" I deeply agreed. "Naturally, it's not excessive. Then it's not excessive for me to have a full meal, right?" Wyatt stared at me, his eyes burning. The me reflected in his eyes was like the most delicate rose in the world. It is said that loving someone is like raising flowers. Wyatt loves me dearly and is reluctant to let me suffer a little grievance or hardship. Instead, I am getting better and better. Wyatt gave me enough of what I didn't get in 2 lifetimes. I put my hands around his neck, kissed him on the lips, and said, "Not excessive." The end.